Welcome, everybody, to the Bassfug Podcast. Today, we have a very, very special guest. This has been months in the making. I am with Felix Helix, a.k.a. Raminda, of the Felix Helix project. How are you today?
Not so bad, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing good. So let's talk about COVID-19. How has that been affecting your producing life?
Not a whole lot, to be honest, mate. I mean, so being in the UK, we had and still have a lockdown. And what that really meant was I had a bunch of tracks, that were kind of in process for a new EP. And, I was just needing to get a decent amount of time to mix and master them down. Which luckily did happen as a result of the lockdown because the gyms were shut and I had no other outlet. And actually what happened was because of the way that the world was being at the time and the way that the world is being, I just wanted to get away from everything, right? I just, I wanted to hole up and, just get to work. So, I wouldn't call it a blessing, but I would certainly say that circumstances aligned to make me far more efficient than I would have been ordinarily. Maybe not in a psychologically healthy way, but, well, whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. What you said the gyms were closed as an outlet. Do you find that exercise is like an important part of the process? I know that sounds kind of dumb, but I used to go to the gym a lot until I kind of messed up my back. And,
okay.
I would listen to, it's nothing serious, but I was putting too many plates that I couldn't lift on my deadlift. But anyways, I go listen to albums and I get really pumped up. And then I go home and I try to sort of replicate that feeling. Is it the same for you?
I think it's mostly just to relieve pent up energy. A lot of what we do involves sitting in front of the computer in a single position. And I think it's just healthy to, not do that and just to keep control of your body. So, I mean, I kind of look at it as an outlet, a stress reliever, but maybe not necessarily something which boosts creativity. And, being healthy is always a good thing, right? In this day and age, a lot of us won't be getting our sort of exercise in a day, and we'll be sort of sat in front of screens for a long old time. And yeah, it's important to get away from that, I think.
Yeah. And also too, there's some bands that you see live and the singer is just so out of gas, like after the second song and they could barely sing, and it's just like, this guy maybe needs like a treadmill routine or something. I won't call anybody out, but I've seen it happen.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? A lot of performing artists don't live particularly healthy lifestyles either. There's some of the stories from Pantera and all the rest of it, right? Where Dimebag Darrell's kind of completely wheezing and on his 10th bottle of whiskey for the night before he's to hit stage, which is just nuts.
Yeah. I don't
it's
know.
Kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, especially, and it's Dimebag too, it's not like the guitarist from Green Day or something, it's
well, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult. Let's talk about playing live. Is that something that you do a lot, or is that something you haven't really explored yet?
Oh, it's been a thorn on my side for at least a decade. So I'll start this with just sort of saying I've never gotten on with Ableton Live, which seems to be how people get into playing live, right? It does all the warping and all the rest of it. But I just don't like it. So I've been trying to find my own way of doing it. And every time I've tried, it's not really gotten very far. So, I mean, I played a noise gig back in 2014 as part of a different project, but that was really it. Like, the latest stab at this has been taking samples from various things that I've done and loading them onto like a Yamaha Groove Box and just trying to work a live routine from there. But no, the short answer is, I'd like to play live, but I need a platform that I'm happy with to do it, and I haven't got that yet.
Let's talk about gear. You mentioned the Yamaha Groove Box. What are you using, and what is your production workflow right now?
Workflow right now is start writing in Renoise. So I'm a tracker boy. And then, once I've got an arrangement that I'm quite happy with, I'll export multi-tracks out to Reaper, to do sort of an initial mix down, get the panning and the EQing right. So with this last EP that I did, the Transformation, I then exported those out and I gave them to a friend of mine who's also a producer, a guy called Gianni Barber. So shout out to him. And then he just mastered it. So yeah, it's Renoise, then Reaper, and then the internet exposure.
Wow. So you don't do your mixes in Renoise. That's interesting. Because what is the, try to help me see what the difference between mastering inside of Renoise is and exporting the waves and putting them into Reaper. Isn't it technically the same thing, or?
I mean, I've no doubt that you can achieve the same thing in Renoise that you could do in my process.
I'm not judging you, by the way. I'm just for the
no, not at all. It's more that so I kind of quite like ambience and sort of a big stereo image, right? And what happens in my mix down process is the number of tracks balloons from 10 to 60 odd. And Renoise as an interface, I just don't think is up to conveniently navigating that number of tracks and sends and returns. It's just a bit too much. So I find it a lot easier to export it out to Reaper. And the other thing is Reaper's got much better control surface integration than Renoise does. So it was very easy just to kind of get yourself a Mackie control type interface and then do the tactile control in Reaper itself.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I've been scared to get one of those. I kind of want one, but at the same time, I'm worried that maybe it won't map to my DAW. I figured, you have to use Cubase or something, so I never wanted to invest the money.
What's your DAW?
I'm using Renoise and Reaper.
Oh, well.
And Audacity.
Yeah, sorry.
And Audacity.
No, nothing wrong with that. Audacity's a great thing to make in the Final Cut. So yeah, I know what you mean. And it was definitely a gamble, cause, I was trying to get everything in super quickly. And I guess I just lucked out cause, the Mackie control type compatible things like, the X Touch in particular, map onto Reaper really, really well. I got out of the box, I started playing, and it's like, oh my God, I don't actually have to do anything to make this basically work how I want it to. And I was kind of surprised because every control surface I've had thus far, you've always had to have a bit of tweaking and all the rest of it, and it's not quite there. But no, this was plug and play, and, the motorized faders are a thing of beauty. So I recommend it. As to Renoise, there is an extension for the X Touch. To get it working. Can't say I'm particularly keen on it, but your mileage may vary. But I personally have found no problems at all with integrating it into Reaper.
Yeah, personally, I just stopped using controllers in my workflow. I guess I'm just sharing because I guess we do similar music styles, and I just. For me, it's just as simple as it could get. Because the music, when you're producing breakcore, it's so complex. If I don't streamline the damn thing, it's just you end up a month later trying to open up the song and you're like, what the fuck did I do? Who made this, So I try to simplify everything right down to the core, only a few tracks, no controllers. That's just my style. I don't know. Do you agree somewhat about keeping it simple when you're producing breakcore?
For the most part, yes. So I guess to expand on that a little bit, when I'm actually writing in Renoise, so as few tracks as is necessary, because I know I'm going to be mixing down in Reaper, you kind of want to go easy on the groups and all this other stuff. It's you kind of learn as you go along. And And there might be like a control surface, like just a bank of knobs just to punch in some kind of sort of filter rolls and whatever else. But much of that's done in keyboard and mouse. Control surface only comes in where I'm actually starting to mix down. I mean, I've got a bit of outboard gear and all of this as well. But
let's hear it. What do you got?
What have I got? Oh, gosh. So just to give you a bit of perspective, I'm 30 now. And I have a Yamaha TX81Z, and I think that's from 1987.
It's a classic.
So that's say again?
I said that's a classic. I had one as well.
Yep.
Square Pusher uses it.
Got it for pocket money when I was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Korg Wave Station AD, thing of beauty, like absolutely magnificent tone generator. Got a Behringer V-amp. Doesn't really make much of an appearance on what I do, but it's nice to have. And the Yamaha RS7000. So that's the kind of, sound module thing. Just a few assorted preamps and all that kind of thing, you know? But, you know, at the end of the day, all that gets recorded into the Renoise sampler, and there's not a whole bunch of VSTs. Much of what you'd be hearing, is sampled. It's not from synthesizers, let's say. It goes from the in-house sampler because you can do all the edits and stuff on that with the retrigger effects on Renoise. And we just go from there. I mean, as you say, a lot of it is in the sequencing, and the kind of organization more than it is about having magic wands and weaponry.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, sorry.
No. I agree. I don't think the appeal of tracking is, so you could have like 20 plugins of Massive or Serum or whatever. I at its very core, it's just about triggering samples. And I think if there was a competitor to Renoise, people would use it. The only reason why everyone likes Renoise is because they're trackers, and the landscape for tracking programs on Windows is pretty abysmal, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of out of the loop for a while. But back when I was looking for different trackers, you had Renoise, and then you had Jessica Buzz. Remember that?
Yeah. Scale.
Which one?
Scale Tracker. Do you remember that? It was like a Fast Tracker 2 clone, and then the guy just abandoned it. I was so pissed off. That was what I was using for a long time.
Oh, wow. And then there was like Milky Tracker and our Guru Stardust. It was the Stardust or something else. It was Aeodix, which was meant to be like a tracker, which you had like blocks. So each block was like top-down sequencing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think what you choose to use does have some bearing on the music, but tracking for me is really nice because you're not bothered about how the music looks. You know, every effort in a tracker interface is made to get you away from how the music looks and actually how it sounds.
Yeah. And it's weird that I think there's an elitism to tracking now because, I don't know. I guess everybody in life is trying to get some sort of weird validation from other people or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, what people don't realize is that tracking was just, I think tracking is a lot easier than using Ableton or Cubase or whatever, you know. It's so simple once you get around the learning curve of it, you know. It's kind of like command line. I don't know if you're familiar with like Linux programming or whatever.
Oh, I'm on Linux as we speak.
Oh, excellent. What distro are you using?
Mint.
Nice. What's your what window manager are you using? Cinnamon or
XFCE?
Nice. Yeah. This is you're a fan of no bloat. But that's the thing, right? Like when you're using the command line, people are like, "Oh, who's this hacker?" But I don't think they realize that like once you learn like how to use the command line, going on Windows, it isn't so much about like, oh, like I'm this elitist hacker guy. Like I would never want to use a GUI. It's like, no. Like doing it this way is so much easier and more efficient and practical than using a GUI in a lot of sense. And I think with tracking, what a lot of people fail to realize is that tracking for the people that are really into it, that have been using it for the last decade, it's just synced to their mind. You know, it's going to be hard to get a tracker onto another DAW because it's just so much easier. It's just so much more practical for doing the things that we want to do to express ourselves. I don't know. Does that make sense? Or
No, I completely agree. I think it's like comparing pen and paper to a word processor, right?
yeah,
With a pen and paper, you know, grab the pen and paper, you start writing. Your thoughts are transferred much quicker than having to turn a computer on, log in, and set your font and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
It's articulation. But I also think that part of the issue is that
Is that your doorbell?
that's the doorbell.
Oh yeah,
Do you
yeah.
mind if I take a sec?
Yeah,
take a second?
go do
Cheers.
it. 1 second.
Tracking.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah. So we're talking about trackers and how people kind of might be a little bit intimidated by the way that they look. And I think it speaks to a lot of what we see nowadays, where people want something that looks simple but isn't necessarily simple, but what it looks like is more important than what it actually is.
In a sense, yeah. I kind of feel like some people just want to learn renoise because they want to be a part of the elite club, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, you know, as you see the notes trigger, it looks really cool. It looks, you know, super sci-fi and stuff, but actually it's a lot more primitive than, let's say, something like Cubase or Ableton or Logic. And actually that's a good thing. But, you know, if you've got a drag and drop interface and, for instance, you've got automatic time stretching, haven't you, on a lot of these sort of scrolling doors, it does take a lot of the initial hump of matching samples up and things like that, which I think is one of the draws of the larger doors, if you see what I mean. It's yeah.
Sorry, when you say that, it's also learning to be more agile and more lean with your approach to making music. Like if you're using Fast Tracker 2, you know, you got to convert your samples, or your samples are going to be 8-bit. You got to make sure your song files are a certain size. And when you sort of graduate from Fast Tracker, you have these good practices to go into your next DAW. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, you know, part of the, I suppose part of the tracking process is that you have to adapt to it. And I don't know if you have to do that in a more conventional DAW. A more conventional DAW will adapt to you. So it's going to allow you to deal with your bad habits, or it's going to accommodate your bad habits in a way that a tracker simply won't. So I'm trying to think of a good example.
And what about price tag? You know, like all these trackers, they're either dirt cheap or free.
Yeah, but I guess that's partly down to market demand, right? I mean, and also just the way that these things are developed. So with Logic, you've got a decent crew of Apple developers working on it full time, I'd imagine. Whereas the Renoise, it's just a bunch of Germans in an office who also work full time.
D-Blue,
but
yeah.
D-Blue indeed, you know, represent Glitch, possibly the best plugin of all time.
That must be that must be insane to be that guy and hear his fucking plugin on the radio like 1,000 million times. Maybe and not so much anymore, but like 6 years ago, like Black Eyed Peas and all these people, they were using his plugin. You could hear they would just leave the default tape stop and like, you know what I mean? Like sort of the default patterns that's on Glitch VST. It must be really wild to produce software and then see, you know, see people creating stuff and being very successful.
Oh, for real? I mean, you know,
I'd love to have him on the show. I should approach him. I definitely should ask him.
He's pretty active on Renoise forums, isn't he?
It's been a while since I've been on there, to tell you the truth. But do you go on the Renoise forums a lot, or?
Only when I'm looking for something. Because, you know, at one point there was an argument about how often it's being released and updated. And, you know, for the reasons I've mentioned before, that there are a bunch of guys who aren't doing this for their main job. And, you know, there's probably not a whole lot of money in it.
Yeah.
It does get updated slowly. That's fine.
Yeah.
But people getting, aggroed about that. And
well, what else do you need?
Pardon?
What else do you need?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, you can have a piano roll in there, but at the end of the day, if you're using a tracker, you're kind of missing the point if you're wanting that.
I think the one major thing that they added to Renoise, I'm happy we're talking about tracking, like this is right, it's a nice change of pace, was the image scaling. That was my only gripe with, personally, I'm a Fast Tracker 2 guy to the day I die. That's my tracker. But obviously, it's become a pain in the ass to use it. And when you use it in DOSBox, it's not the same, and it's just kind of whatever. But the thing for me, in Fast Tracker 2, you could really increase the size of the tracks and the fonts. And I found on Renoise, it was hard to scale like the image. Everything was still kind of really tiny. So even if I went into the options and tried to make everything, the line spacing big and the font big, it still wasn't quite there. But now when they added the Retina support or whatever it is, I think that was sort of the last thing that I needed. I didn't really need anything else, maybe some type of RNS to XM conversion tool, but that already exists with the plugins. Like you can make your own plugins with the Lua scripting or whatever, Lua scripting.
Lua. Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I use the sort of the high DPI settings myself. I just have two screens and just run it across the two screens, so it looks like something out of the Matrix. But I guess you're like maybe you're not on a Mac or something, but if you're on a Retina display, probably on something high resolution capable, you probably can get something out of that.
No, I'm on cheap monitors that I find at thrift stores, and I'm running. All my computers have some variant of Linux on it, GNU Linux, and I have one Windows PC that I keep around so I don't have to buy a console. I tried doing gaming on Linux, and it was pretty good, but I don't think we're there yet. It's looking good with Proton, but anyway, so I just have some Windows machine that has my super expensive video card in it. So.
I got yeah. I can't say I'm a gamer, so it's a world that's sort of lost to me. Fortnite's about as deep as I got.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But sorry, what was the draw to Linux for you as a musician?
So I'm not producing on Linux. I produce on Windows, but Linux is my sort of kickabout OS. But with Linux, I've been using that for 15 odd years. And I found that it's good because the security is integrated and it's a good environment to get most work done. So, if you want to do a bit of text writing or browsing the web or your taxes or whatever, Linux has it. For instance, I wrote my PhD thesis in Linux, using like LaTeX and all the rest of it, just because it's conducive to workflow. You don't need to bloat anything up. Everything's fast and there and good to go. Its security's built in by design. It's rock solid. You can leave a Linux PC running for 2 weeks straight and it's not gonna, screw out on you. Yeah.
And there's so many tools. Like I try to encourage my music making friends. Hey, okay, sure, Jack Audio is a gigantic pain in the ass, and Pulse Audio is kind of weird and fucks up a lot. But like once you set the real time kernel and you have the priority there, real time priority and stuff like that, it's not bad. It's you could use it with Bitwig or Renoise, and it's beautiful to see that there's some pretty competent production tools being on Linux now. But one thing is the scripting capabilities, my setup now, my live setup is I use a Nintendo DS running Nitro Tracker. And believe it or not, this is the best. Nitro Tracker is my favorite tracker right now because I would go play shows, someone would be like, oh, here, drive 6 hours to the city and play the show. And then I show up and then my laptop fucking breaks before I go on stage or some bullshit. And I was like, I can't do this anymore, So I started experimenting with this tracker and I was taking my old songs and porting them to .xm and then eventually just writing on the thing instead of doing the porting. And it's a 2 megabyte limit on the Nintendo DS. So I wrote a script in SOX, S-O-X.
How about this? This is you released an album on that, didn't you?
Yeah.
I saw something on your Bandcamp, and it actually sounded pretty kind of. You wouldn't expect it to have been written on a DS.
It's getting there. It's getting there. Yeah. That was the preliminary one where it was only DS.
Right.
But now I'm like sort of mastering how to get it to sound like on par with a DAW. But if I would write scripts in SOX, SOX, it's this command line utility in Linux to downsample my samples. So I'd have my what I put on the DS. This just, I'm sure your sample folder is the same thing. You got like 1,000 WAV files or some shit. So this does is it iterates through every folder, converts everything to 8-bit mono 32 hertz. And to do that manually is a pain in the ass, but you write a script, it's so easy, and then it does it for you, and it's just stuff like that helps your workflow, like I'm a big fan of Linux. I think it's the best. Anyways, sorry about that tangent. I just want to
it's okay. Like, it's not something I've really thought about going further into and investigating, because I've just thought, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm more comfortable with using Windows for.
Yeah.
Production's one of them. But
well, Reaper and Renoise. Sorry, I'm trying to convert you here. That's what we do, right? But you can run Reaper and Renoise in Linux.
Yeah, so I've heard. And then maybe in the future it's something I'd look at. Like, you've got I guess the real-time kernel is basically how you'd be able to get very low latencies, right? And that's kind of that's obviously important for producing and all the rest of it. But I'm kind of more keen to hear about your sort of process of playing live, just because I've had a massive headache trying to get anywhere close to that. So you've got your DS. I'm guessing you've got your samples from various tracker files and all the rest of it, and you just convert them from stems and move them across and then rearrange, or is it something a bit more involved than that?
Well, I started with FT2. A lot of my hits, air quotes, were done in FT2, so I have .xms. But the thing is, a lot of them were really big. A lot of them were like 20 or 32 megs. So to get them on the DS, they have to be 2 megs. So for the classics like Pontendoned and stuff like that, I had to open Fast Tracker 2. I had to make some cuts. I had to downsample a bunch of stuff. And then I had to just kind of trim the fat a lot until I got it down to 2 megs. So some of the samples would be like these 4-second long, I don't know, string samples. So I would cut it and then put like a release decay on it. So instead of 4 seconds long, it's like half a second long, but with an envelope on it,
Yeah,
and then, like I said, writing the script to downsample all the waves. You could cram it in there. It's pretty easy. Some of the songs that I did entirely in Renoise that had a bajillion VSTs and stuff like that, I think I was able to get 1 or 2 of them on. But for the most part, I just kind of was like, I could just redo the song and just maybe take one of the hooks and like throw it in. But now I'm just doing all the breakcore. The project is almost entirely on DS now, unless for some reason I don't know. But so now the workflow is more streamlined because I realized kind of porting everything to the DS is a pain in the ass. So now it's just DS. When I'm playing live, the only problem that I'm getting is that people kind of complain about the sound, that there's not enough bass. But sometimes if you have a good sound guy or girl, in this case, it was a sound girl at, what's the name of the bar? Anyway, some bar in Montreal, and she really made it sound like killer, When I played a show with, not the name drop or whatever, but Alec Empire a year and a half ago, and I was opening for him. And he told me, he was like, dude, I heard your set from like the green room or whatever. He said it sounded like really awesome. It adds like a layer of chaos with this thing, because pre-EDM dubstep DJs or whatever, my thing was, try to, do something live, like, get naked, jump on speakers, shit like that. And when you have this Nintendo DS in your hand, it is a million times easier to do that than if you're, you got a Euro rack on stage or some shit. So,
of course.
Yeah. So I got the DS so I could kind of jump in the audience and not, and the thing is, if you break a DS, who cares? Right? It's like $40. I don't know. It's just a win-win situation all around the board on the DS part. So that's sort of where the live show and the albums are going. I'm thinking that in 2021, I want to kind of flex a little bit and kind of go back to my super high production stuff that I kind of got kind of known for. So I might go back to computers and do an Oxygen Fat album that's like entirely using all like serum and like ozone and waves and all that bullshit. But for the most part, I prefer to keep it on the DS. I really suggest it, dude. If you're walking by a pawn shop, go in, see if they have a DS, drop $40. Get a R4 card on AliExpress for $13. And I think once you get past the learning curve, you'll be like, wow, this is awesome. And then when COVID is over, if you're taking the metro or the bus to your work or whatever, it fits in your pocket. You know, you're at the bank and you're producing your next album. I don't know. It's amazing. And it has a stylus. I can't push it enough. I'm sorry, but
no, I'm very interested. Like, so it's funny that you mention it because do you ever remember DJ Scotch Egg? I don't even know if he's active anymore, but I had the privilege of seeing him live many moons ago.
KFC. What was the name of that song? The KFC song, or his album was called like KFC Core or something. I don't remember.
I
Kentucky
don't know
Fried
either,
something. Anyway,
yeah, sorry. It was the Rock Music Days, and you know, lovely chap, really, really nice guy, actually. So we ended up talking about production and all the rest of it, and he's talking about, you know, how it was, Nanoloop, that's what it was. Nanoloop, was good because it gave him limitations, and limitations inspired creativity.
Yeah.
I think the same is true of Renoise and a lot of the Trackosphere, right?
Yeah.
So, but, you know, his live rig, he just pulled out of a sock or something, and starts like, you know, just jumping around, and is just completely off the wall. And he wouldn't have been able to do that, as you say, with a Eurorack. And there's another guy, a chap called Head Cleaner, who, did have a Eurorack type thing. And the entire set would be him, his back to the crowd, and he's doing all the wires, because I guess that was his show, right?
Yeah.
Just doing all the patching. But it was a very different vibe, and it wasn't quite as dynamic as what Scotch Egg was able to pull out.
Yeah.
And even then, like, you know, the bass on that was incredible, right? Like, an 8-bit square wave is an 8-bit square wave, and it's going to sound pretty high pressure if you've got the right speakers, right?
Yeah. And even with the Eurorack thing, it's not to diss people that are doing that kind of stuff on stage. It's just, I think that we're coming to a clear distinction between like sort of TED Talk shows versus like kind of traditional sort of punk rock shows, you know, whereas DJ Scotch Egg would be like the punk rock show. And, you know, I think a lot of like Eurorack guys might be giving more of a clinic than they're putting on a show, you know?
I think that's a fantastic point. And I think in my limited exploration of that sort of sphere of things, it's very much like, oh, here's my modular synthesizer. Yeah. Here's the maths it can do. Yeah. And oh, by the way, here's the music it can make. And actually, I've never really enjoyed that sort of perspective on things where the gear comes first. And because of what Eurorack is, it's very gear led. And I'm sure that some folks appreciate that, and more power to them. But for me, it should really be about the sounds that are coming out of it more so than the bit multiplier that goes into the clock divider, that goes into this $600 filter module, you know?
Yeah. I was thinking about this a lot, and I don't want to discourage that, because I think that's cool too. I just think there's starting to be a divide, and I kind of wish that, what is it called? Not TED Talk, but what is a TED Talk again? It's I said the word like 4 minutes ago. Like a presentation clinic. Thank you. Why aren't these clinics more popular? You know, because like I wouldn't mind going to a thing and watching a guy with a Eurorack for an hour. And, you know, I think it's very entertaining and interesting. It's just that if it's a Saturday night and I want to get shit-faced and party, I don't know if I want to see, you know, the history of FM synthesis, right? Like in front of me. I want to see some crazy guy, you know, pumping out the jams, right? So yeah. I've been thinking about that, and I've been trying to talk to my friends. Like, maybe we should start throwing clinics for some things, like even for Renoise users. Like, what a perfect thing to do. Have a projector, rent out like a university classroom for like $100, say $10 at the door. We're going to have Felix Helix demonstrate for an hour his live music, and then he's going to go show us how to do it in Renoise. I think it'd be really cool to see more of that, you know?
I think, yeah, from a teaching perspective, absolutely. You know, giving people the tools and the, you know, the power to see how this stuff works, right? Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things with what we do is that it sounds pretty mysterious, but once you see the tracker roll and see how things operate, it becomes less so. And you allow people to express themselves once they've got the tools to do that. And so, yeah, I think I'd definitely be in for that. And I think actually, I can't remember if it was, I saw something on Facebook where I think it was an Aussie. They're throwing tracker clinics, maybe some chap from Nasenbluten or some
toe cutter,
like
passenger
toe
shit.
cutter.
No, those are the two breakcore guys from Australia that I know of that use trackers.
Okay.
I don't know much about them.
Sorry.
I don't know much about them.
Sorry?
I said I don't know much about them. Those are just the two names that I know. Yeah.
No, I saw that they were giving clinics, but I suppose I differ from you in the sense that I look at that as kind of, let's do that to empower people to find their voice.
Of course.
Right. Yeah. But then once they've found their voice, let's not worry too much about how they're speaking. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Yeah.
That's just my view on things. So for me, if something sounds good and is emotive, that takes priority over how it was made. And actually, you've mentioned it, and I think it's worth talking about a little bit, because I tried to get into a little bit like live coding using tidal cycles and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I just hadn't the patience for it. Like, I think Ben Jordan had kind of looked into doing that sort of thing. But
shout out to Ben Jordan, episode 30. Just go back we interviewed Ben Jordan. Just trying to put a plug in there. Yeah.
No. So I saw, but you know, he's clearly a very, very clever guy, right? But I kind of thought, I mean, this is cool and all, and the idea of procedural music is very nice, but what I kind of really think is important is using that to get a message across, as opposed to just making the music through a certain mechanism, if you know what I mean. The music shouldn't be recognized for how it's made. It should be recognized for the music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't you find that in the age of YouTube, well, here, one second. I noticed that, you know, now this is outside of the sphere of electronic music too. This has infiltrated almost every aspect of, let's say, bedroom producer, musician. For me, I'm thinking solely in terms of metal. You know, if you look at metal now, like guys that go to metal shows, they're looking at every single note the guy's playing, what kind of guitar the guy's playing, what kind of amp he has, what his presets are, and everything is so scientific now. And you go on YouTube and they're just constantly berating each other and making fun of each other, and it seems like it's less about the expression and it's more about how well you could do the dance to specifications. Do you find that with the advent of YouTube, which is the ultimate clinic for music production tips, you know, do you find that a lot of music just sort of lost that sort of soul and that expression, and now it's literally just people that make music listening to other guys that make music and sort of critiquing and providing feedback, and it's more morphed into a hobby than it has something for experimentation?
I think there's something to be said for that, yeah. So I think there's certainly a division between hobbyist musicians, so to speak. I think there's a lot of people who want to make music for the act of making music, right? They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're not trying to break the world. And that's absolutely fine, right? That's okay. But what they are trying to do is try to sound like Deadmau5 or whoever, which is kind of where you get a lot of this discussion about how to, craft patches and so on and so forth. And I think that's a sort of background of people that you're seeing come into the fore as music making has become more accessible. So I think, yes, there is a lot of that. And actually one of my other sort of side interests is opera. I don't sing or anything like that. I just like listening to it. But, what you say about metal resonated because you'll see the trashy comments in some pieces of an opera rendition or something like that on YouTube that somebody didn't quite nail the high C or whatever the hell. And it's about the technicality of it more so than the message. And, I don't really know what I think about that. I think technique is important, but it's only as important in as much as poor technique shouldn't distort the message. Anything beyond that isn't really all that necessary. So there's that. And I think when I was younger, certainly I'd kind of be of the same bent that technique makes the music. Okay. So I'd spend hours and hours trying to get the glitches all right and, everything super original and micro sequenced and all the rest of it. But then, you'd have spent like ages on a passage which you didn't really feel did much in the service of the flow of a song. And I think that since I've stopped worrying about that, and kind of focused more on how the noises, the tones, the atmosphere works in the context of a song, I've become more prolific.
And it's liberating.
Say again?
It's liberating.
It's liberating. But I kind of wonder then if a lot of this is down to the kind of audience, that you find at, let's say, metal gigs or on sort of like EDM clinics on YouTube. Maybe it's just that they're very young and that they don't really understand, or they have not spent enough time in the game to realize that stuff is secondary to what it is they're trying to communicate. Yeah.
No, sorry. Kind of in the pre-interview, we were talking about what we were and weren't going to talk about or whatever. And one of the things we were discussing was sort of the idea of expression in art and sort of how the COVID situation might impact how people express themselves. When I hear you're talking about maybe young people are focused too on the technicality side of things, I'm wondering how much is it that they don't even realize that music was primarily used as a form of expression. And in the last 20 years, I think a lot of popular music I guess it's always been, popular music's been kind of a tool of corporate America, but if you're 14 years old right now, what is your baseline for popular music? It's a lot of stuff that's just talking about partying, and making money, and which is fine, but you know what I mean? I don't know. Is there has the new generation sort of lost its ability to express itself through music? We see all these protests in the United States and all around the world, and I'm wondering where is the next Public Enemy? Where's the Fear of the Black Planet albums? I don't see these albums. Maybe it's because maybe the type of music I listen to, it doesn't go into it, but I don't see really albums expressing themselves about how they feel. It's more just like they go on Twitter and they try to get each other fired. And it's less about expressing themselves through music. Do you think that might be why young people are more focused on the clinical aspects of music production?
It's a good point.
They lost their way.
It might be, I've never really thought about it that way, but I guess, what do Britney and the Black Eyed Peas and I don't know. I'm giving away my age and lack of exposure to pop culture here, but what do they all have in common? They've got platoons of mastering engineers. They've got clinically engineered tracks, and everything sounds absolutely spot on. And if the message is much the same, then the execution becomes more important. And so I guess, the technicality and the quality of sound is what matters. And I think you see that a lot with, reading comments on the EDM production forums on Reddit, where they're not trying to express anything. They're trying to come across sharp. And yes, maybe it is that expression now is done through words and social media. It is through getting somebody banned or censored on Twitter and all the rest of it. And in doing so, there is no need for artistic protest in these people's minds.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I mean, I think as well as time goes on and as technology plays a bigger and bigger part in our lives, our life experience becomes more and more homogeneous, right? I could probably talk to you, let's say, about the Game of Thrones and
never
know
watched
about it.
Sorry.
You've never watched it, nor have I. Fine.
Yeah. Star Trek, the original series.
Good man.
Yeah.
So we could talk about that. But the fact is, these experiences have they're coming to you over in Canada and me over in the UK. And it's super easy. Our experience is no longer so different that we need to sort of present it to one another, right? We all kind of have the same hymn sheet. And in becoming the same, there is very little to talk about, which would be a great tragedy. One of the things that I've been trying to get across, at least in sort of creative practice that I have, is that, I'm from Indian origin, hence the funny name, as it were. We have a kind of tradition of polyrhythmic music and so on. And I'm trying to bring that a little bit out to the fore. But
is Helix a popular Indian last name? I'm just joking.
Sorry?
I said, is Helix a popular Indian last name? I'm just joking.
Justice Smith is in the English-speaking world. I'm trying to bring across a sort of thing that I feel worth presenting. And as you say, maybe it is that people now just don't really have a whole lot to say because it's already been said. Certainly, if you look at political channels of whatever stripe you are on YouTube, on whatever side of an argument, you'll find that there's a certain, there's certain columns of thought, right? Let's take, the abortion versus anti-abortion. Pro-life say that every life is sacred, and then, pro-choice say that it's a person's right to choose, and that's fair enough. But the arguments are often of a very similar stripe. So once you've got all these arguments and perspectives laid out, what point is there in trying to come up with new ones and be creative? Because if you know everything already, there's no point in trying to throw your hat into the ring, almost.
And all those arguments were formulated for you by someone else in the first place,
Yeah.
The propaganda channels, it's like you're either getting it from A or B,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for people trying to discover things independently, because even if they come to the same conclusion as everybody else, their process will have been slightly different, and it will have probably highlighted something else on the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
And sorry.
It's okay. I don't know, if you're trying to sound like Britney, and there's a way of sounding like Britney out on YouTube, the little fuck ups and stuff that you're going to make on your way to sounding like Britney independently aren't things that you're going to do anymore. And in that way, the sort of defects, inverted commas, that you have as an artist aren't there. That's one less individualizing feature of you as an artist.
You said, there isn't anything to be said because something's been said. And it's interesting because I don't want to get too metaphysical here, I don't care, but I just don't want to sound like douchebaggy or whatever. But there's something about music that expresses what isn't said, you could listen to a song. This is a weird side note. I rented a car yesterday and had a CD player in it. So I was like, oh cool. Wow. So I grabbed all these old CDs I had, and I have the Train Spotting soundtrack. Right.
Yes.
And on the Train Spotting soundtrack, there's that Blur song, not the one, the woohoo one, but the Sing. That's the name of the song, Sing. It's this, and you're listening to that song, and the guy isn't. I don't even know what the guy is saying, but there's just this fucking vibe when you're listening to it, or even like Brian Eno, and you're just like, it's weird. It's just like this fucking vibe that I couldn't articulate if you gave me $1 million, you know, and that was a way for. We're around the same age, I presume, and there was an articulation through music that you didn't really even have to understand what the words were. You just knew it was, you know, if you're listening to Marilyn Manson, you kind of got a vibe. You know, if you listen to Nine Inch Nails, you got a vibe. If you listen to Metallica, you got a vibe. And I think the problem is that we're relying too much on words as the primary mode of expression, you know, and not through the sonic wonders of the synthesizer, right?
No, I absolutely agree. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do. It's because there are certain things that just can't be spoken. It's not that they're offensive or anything. You just can't put them into words.
Yeah, like a lot of your earlier albums are very ambient or dark ambient when you're exploring your discography. And although it might not have lyrics, you could tell, there's something here, you know?
Yeah. So, and, there's dedications I put in sort of like the EPs, which is like dedicated to the things beyond words. It's kind of trying to make it more clear. How can one put into words the feeling somebody gets, let's say, after a sunrise or something? You can write a poem about it, but it's not going to go a certain way. And I think people have dealt with that for hundreds of years, actually. I think, I've gotten quite into like the music of Richard Wagner. And in one of his operas.
Watch out.
Sorry?
I said, watch out.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
It's cancelled, but yeah. But yeah,
just dog whistle Beethoven. Or Bach. I don't know.
No, I've not got into much Beethoven, but
okay. Actually, I think the Nazis did use Beethoven too. Everybody used Ode to Joy. Every single political movement used Ode to Joy at some point, I think. So whatever, you're fine. Don't worry about it. We know.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
No. I mean, So I've read some of Wagner's essays as well, and like, let's put it this way. I think the guy was a lunatic, but he wrote some good tunes. But at the end of Tristan and Isolde, I think there's there's a piece which is absolutely beautiful, right? And you really should check it out. And maybe I'll send you a link to it on YouTube.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Say it?
We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah. But it's about the beauty of music and actually the experience of seeing a lover dead. And I can't really put it into words, which is kind of why it needs to be watched and seen. But it's not unique to you. It's not unique to me. To want to express what we can't really put into words. And I think every human has those things, has those feelings. And I believe that everybody's got a fundamental creative drive and that they should be empowered to act upon it, regardless whether that's through music, through like drawing art, whatever, right? And it just seems a crying shame that people don't.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you mention Wagner, because if you look at who is the guy, Zarathustra, Strauss?
Nietzsche.
Yeah, but Richard Strauss wrote the song "Also Spake Zarathustra." It's about Nietzsche's book. It's the 2001 theme, the dun, dun,
oh yeah.
And it's crazy because if you kind of watch like an analysis video of it on YouTube or whatever, like the guy, like when he's doing the chords, like he put it in a certain way to sort of represent Zarathustra coming down from the mountain. And basically, for those who haven't read the book, it's about a guy who was a PC, and then he walked down the mountain to the consul plebs, and anyways, had to live among them. But the when you're listening to that song, it's really expressive, and you really kind of get that vibe, that it is something great, and he didn't even mention a word in it. So yeah, I get where you're going with that for sure.
Yeah, and that actually leads us to where we are now in the 21st century. I mean, back to, with classical music, we had melody as the chief method of expression. And from that, you had these rules, the circle of fifths and so on and so forth. And you had to be kind of schooled in how to express yourself, using the palette that the old masters had, as it were. And now we've got all these wonderful things that allow us not to worry about that sort of stuff. The tone of a synthesizer can be used to express certain things like the chirping of a bird, heck, even a sampler. Yeah. And so, we've now become much more empowered, to try to express ourselves. And I think we don't need as much training as we once did. As you say, maybe some clinics would be nice to get on the gear, but we are able to speak if we want to speak. And it's not as hard as it once was.
Yeah. I'm wondering if, it's never been better. It's never been better. There's a lot of doom and gloom, but we're living, each individual person, no matter what rung of the social caste we're on, I guess we're all living like kings. You can't deny it with the access that we have to being able to express ourselves. The fact that we're able, at least us in our countries, we're able to express ourselves.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's maybe something lost with the idea of just, well, as I'm saying that, it's the same, maybe the piano roll is the same as writing down the notes on paper. I don't know. But, yeah, I'm just a breakcore producer, so I don't know. But it seems like maybe there was, I don't know, maybe it's better now than it was. I don't know. What do you think?
In terms of ease of expression, or?
Well, in terms of the quality of expression, there's a lot of, we'll go to the classical producers here, if we could call them that, composers. Was their music a better form of expression because they took 2 years and wrote it down on pen or on paper with ink, or is it the same thing as spending 2 years in Cubase or Ableton or whatever?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think it would filter out the kind of person who has a certain worldview, right? Because to want to spend 2 years trying to express something kind of suggests that they really, really think it's worth talking about. But does that mean it really is? I don't know. I think it's for a listener to sort of to figure that one out for themselves, because ultimately the sort of value, beauty, and all the rest of it, it's in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. With that being said, I guess there is something to be said for craft, being able to practice and being able to articulate yourself a lot better. But it's entirely up to the person at hand as to whether they make use of that skill or not. It's hard to describe. And I think the best way to put it is you can be the best damn classical composer in the world, but if you've got nothing to say, you've got nothing to say. Yeah. And what something to say is I think defined by who's listening.
Yeah. Raminda, we're getting close to, I just looked at the time and I'm taking up all your time. We got to have you back on the show for sure. You're interesting to talk to. Let's kind of go towards the end here and let's talk about where breakcore is going. Let's talk about that, kind of explore this area, and then we could talk about your projects and your new album. For me, when I started with breakcore, I had no idea what the fuck it was. I was some hillbilly in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I happened to be posting on message boards in 2001, 2002. Some guys told me that I was making drill and bass, and then they told me I was making breakcore, and I just sort of kept doing that and discovered Venetian snares, and then sort of was inspired by that. And then that was my journey through breakcore. It all went to shit for me when Glitch VST came out. And I know that sounds like snobbish, but for me, I think where I was getting a little bit of internet clout was because I was able to sort of replicate the same quality that Venetian Snares was able to, but I was just some net label guy. But I think when and it was easy. It wasn't a matter of genius or skill or whatever. It's just because I was a tracker, and as you know, being a tracker, breakcore and trackers, it's like the easiest thing to do once you figure it out. You know, it's hard not to do breakcore if you're coming from a tracker. You know, but you know, post Glitch VST, I found it was good, and there was some stuff coming out, but I think the what's the word I'm looking for? The novelty sort of was saturated, you know, because when you listen to a Venetian Snares album, you'd be like, oh, wow, this is fucked up. I've never heard anybody like this. Like maybe Aphex Twin and Square Pusher and some other handful of people, but you know, it was a particular sound. But then I found when the Glitch VST sort of democratized making glitch beats, I found it wasn't so much that everybody was making glitch beats. I felt like people weren't refining the beats. So the drum beats would be chaotic, but they wouldn't be because
there's no direction to them.
Yeah. You know, you'd listen to a V snare song and you'd be like, wow, this is fucked up. But there was a rhythm to it, you know, even though the timing was fucked up and maybe the sounds were all crazy and demonic or whatever, you could tap your foot to it. You know, it was in time and the drum fills were there. And it was like, okay, maybe a human can't play this on drums, but like a human with like robot arms or something might be able to play this on drums, you know? But when you have the Glitch VST, I found people would just leave the defaults on. And then it kind of didn't sync, you know, it wasn't, you couldn't tap your foot to it. So that was my sort of thing with it. And then, you know, I sort of kind of tuned out a little bit. That's my sort of analysis on it. What about you? What do you think about breakcore and its direction and where it's going?
Sort of broadly agree with you. So I think one of the things that I found with the artists that I like the most, you know, V Snares and Zelopticon in particular, is that there's like a point, you know? So I think one of my favorite V Snares tracks is All the Children Are Dead. Awesome. So that's off Dol Dol Dol. And what he's doing is, you know, you've got the 7/4 programming and whatever else, but it's there and it's presenting this ominous atmosphere, right? It's really talking to you.
And you know what, sorry, as a side note, the 7/4 programming, it isn't hard to do in a tracker. There's literally a button that you press that does it in 7/4. So just to go back to like how robust trackers are, maybe that's a hard thing to achieve in Ableton or something. But in a tracker, you could set the line length of your patterns and you could put it in any weird time signature you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same is broadly true of sort of linear doors. Like the old eMagic Logic used to be able to put time signature changes, which would change the grid. So some of the really early stuff I did had that, but you know, time signatures only sound like time signatures if you're taking notice of the grid, which I definitely wasn't at that time. So, you know, let's not worry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I'm not sure what's happened, but it seems to be that people like the breakcore sound and, you know, it's a good sound. And they wanted to emulate it. But what's resulted is that, it's very easy to get your chopped and pitched arm end and throw it around a lot and, you know, fashion keys and all the rest of it. But there's no kind of convergence into like a song. And I think that's a shame because what we have in breakcore is something that you've got the ability to express something that no human can, and use all the sounds at your disposal without it sounding out of place or fucked up or whatever. But yeah, everything's getting more formulaic. And I think actually that's true of any genre, right? That's just what happens if something's been around for long enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't honestly say I know too much about breakcore in 2020 to sort of see whether that's still a persisting trend, but it does seem like a lot of the leading lights aren't really there anymore. Cause, you know, we could talk about the top 5 breakcore albums, if you will. So we could sort of say, I don't know, Laser Thrash, Liminal Space or whatever, but that was over a decade ago. I'm not sure that there's much on the horizon, but then again, the same is true of metal and whatever else. As things become democratized, as you've mentioned, more and more people want to get into doing the thing as a mode of self-expression, which is perfectly okay and fine. But as that happens and as that progresses, maybe people have, there's less and less to be said. There's less and less unique in that.
Do you think it has to do with sort of just the genre itself not being as popular as, say, it was in 2005? And then just sort of people were only producing because that's where the listeners were, and maybe they moved on to other things. Because you saw like a lot of guys that were, when breakcore was popular, then they're like, oh yeah, I make breakcore. And then dubstep came out. They're like, oh, I make dubstep. And then and they just sort of kind of jumped to each genre, which is fine, but do you think that perhaps maybe the breakcore genre sort of lost its steam because people just didn't see any value creating for it? Do you think there's people that there isn't as many people that listen to it either?
I don't think there's been that many people who listen to it throughout the entire time, really. I mean, it did seem a bit sort of fashionable. Oh, a little bit more fashionable than it is now.
Yeah.
Like back a decade ago. But I think, if you go to a breakcore night, at least in the UK, you'd find 10 people there and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And that would be perfectly typical.
Yeah.
In terms of production and production incentives, yeah, I think that's broadly true. I've known a few people who kind of started out in the drill and bass thing, so to speak. Indeed, abusing glitch. And then kind of graduating onto things like dubstep, trap, breakbeat.
I have no problem with glitch, by the way, just to throw that out there for people listening.
No, nor have I.
I mean, you just you select it, you turn it on, and then you don't switch any of the knobs, or you don't downsample it and cut it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, okay, well, I know what the default thing sounds like. No,
I know what you mean, but it's that kind of thing of if you have to study for a couple of years or whatever, as it were, going back to the previous point, to express yourself versus having to study for 5 minutes. The thing that you're wanting to get across becomes much more it has to become a lot more important to you. And I think, when it becomes super easy to do something and make the sound, then everybody reaches for the easiest thing because that's just the very human thing to do. But yeah, I don't know. Definitely my view is that producers have graduated, and that's cool too, because maybe they just wanted to see other technical challenges. For instance, I've never been able... Sorry?
No, I was going to say something. I'll hold my point. You finish your point and I'll say my point.
Yeah. So I've never been able to produce good sounding drum and bass or anything like that, right? I just can't get the flow right. But I can see how somebody would want to take that challenge on and to learn and to develop in doing so, right? So I think it also depends on how you view yourself as an artist. Are you an artist of a certain type, or do you just use sound to express yourself? In which case, make beautiful sounds regardless of what the genre is. It doesn't really matter.
One thing I sort of notice is with this podcast now, it's really broken down my biases, I think, and I get to talk to a lot of producers, like dubstep guys, breakcore guys, all across the board. And one thing I notice is that Aphex Twin in particular is really popular now with a lot of young guys who are post EDM. So what I mean by that is guys who just started because they wanted to make club bangers, but now they're trying to find their own voice. And on their communities, on Reddit or whatever, a little of our communities are sort of bleeding into their communities now. And even though they're making kind of that Steve Aoki kind of EDM kind of sounding stuff, there's a lot more dirty fills and weird glitch parts. And you see a lot of them are crediting Venetian snares or Aphex Twin. I have some friends in particular that kind of reach out to me out of the blue, and it's like, oh, I thought you just listened to kind of generic house music or whatever, but they're like, no, I'm really into Venetian snares. I've always really been into them, and they're trying to copy them. And if you go look on his Spotify, I think he's getting like 60,000 plays a month, or he has 60,000 listeners a month or something. There's something there. Yeah, I think I don't think breakcore is as dead as people think it is. I think it's sort of morphed into a genre that's kind of reborn as elitism again. and I think there's people trying to kind of cop it and bring it into their own genres. I don't know if you know what I'm saying.
No, I know what you're saying. Like, there's definitely that kind of, the sound design has crept into a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the stutter edit type thing. It's crept in. And I guess it's sort of, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but maybe it's just because when it all started, everything was sort of hyper technical. And a lot of the glitches and the bends and stuff were masters of technique. And when people realized, hey, this actually sounds pretty cool, they integrated it into their own artistic palette.
Yeah. No, I think I agree. I had songs that I think, you know, I showed to a friend and they're like, I don't get it. Like, it's too fucked up. But then 3 years later, they're like, oh yeah, this is really good. You know? So I think there's people trying to just differentiate themselves. And especially if you're a young producer in EDM or whatever, if you see this thing that's kind of fucked up, it's like, well, maybe if I grab a little chunk of this and wear it on my sleeve a little bit, it'll differentiate me from the millions of other people that are using Serum and Ableton and, you know, doing the music that sounds like everything else, you know? I think it's sort of the thrift store find of music genres. Like, people are kind of going in, pulling out a thing and sort of creating their own identity. That's sort of what I see with the popularization of it recently. For guys like us, like you said, you aren't up to speed with what's going on in breakcore now. And it's the same with me. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we're just getting old and sort of just
That's probably it.
Yeah. And just all the people that kind of were there just kind of moved on to other things in their lives.
Yeah. I mean, it might just be that they've decided that they've done what they wanted to do and gone ahead. It's like, with, you know, it's power noise, but Imminent Starvation ended up doing like Glitch and all the rest of it. And, you know, that's fine too, right? People move on, and that's life. I mean, going back to what you said about, sort of adopting techniques, I just kind of thought of funk, right? Funk gave us the Amen break, and look what happened there.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess it's the natural cycle of things, and that's kind of cool to see, right?
That's an amazing, that's an amazing full circle you just completed there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up. I don't want to take all your time. We got to have you back on. You're very interesting to talk to. I've got a lot of insights. Let's talk.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's talk about your new album before we go, and talk about where people could reach you. The Transformation, a great album.
Thank you.
We were kind of putting off this interview because I think you wanted to complete that before you came on. Can you talk about the process of that and sort of why it was your labor of love, I'm presuming?
You'll have to define labor of love.
It took you a long time to make it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I kind of started making like random tracks a long time ago and did a first EP eventually, and then found that I kind of liked the idea of organizing things into certain projects. So yeah, the Transformation was the first EP/album that I did, which was written entirely in a tracker because I was trying to get things a lot faster. It was taking me ages to do anything using a linear type DAW. And it's where I wanted like a coherent sound. I sort of knew what it was that I wanted to like get across. You know, I like the fact that I could do like sort of time stretch atmospheres, you know, just basically abusing Paul stretch, and putting beats over the top of it. And from various people, it sounded as though that kind of thing was a nice niche for me to occupy. People liked that, and I liked doing it. So I thought, let's vibe on that for a little bit, and then keep on with it. So I kind of just spent time chipping away at it and just trying to add material. So I think the order of writing was She, the Tomb Goddess, then it was The Cycle, then The Missing Pieces, and then Varuna and the Flood. With each one kind of feeding into the other. And yeah, not really sure I'm going with this. Like, it was just to try to convey an entire mood, basically. And then once I had it in place, there were certain things I knew that I wanted not to do. So the first EP that I did, called Vibrations.1, I didn't really mix it or anything like that. And I thought, okay, it sounds good on my near fields. That's it, release it. And then, I put it on the hi-fi and just thought, holy fucking shit, what have I done? Like, oh my God. I mean, it sounds like a wet fart,
Really.
But so I kind of wanted to get the production value a little bit higher on that. So I spent time reading into mixing and all the rest of it. Speaking of which, there's a book called The Mixing Engineer's Handbook.
Yes.
Very worth reading.
Yes.
And actually, as I was mixing down, I kept a copy of it like open in the second screen because it's just like, oh my God, there's a recipe for this stuff. And oh my God, if you do as it says, it works.
Yeah. It's like $200 on Amazon now or something, huh?
Oh, wow. Okay.
You gotta get that PDF.
Yeah.
Shout out to libgen.rush or whatever that's. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So well worth it. But, I wanted to get a better production value in and all the rest of it. And I kind of was fairly happy with how it sounded. Like, my problem when I write is that I get distracted awfully easy and I kind of browse the internet whenever I incur a creative block. And another benefit of the constant stream of bad news that we've had this year was that procrastinating would be punished. There would be nothing good on Reddit. There'd be nothing good on YouTube. Going surfing on those sites would just, it would make you wish you had, right? So it was just a good idea to just unplug the internet and then just work hard.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I was able to get things done a lot quicker. So it took a while, but I think a lot of that was down to my own laziness and procrastination and lack of flow and needing to do what's done. And I kind of found the way to fix that was just to block everything out. And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't something that I actually set out to do. It's just what happened,
And it's harder to do now because we got these stupid fucking phones that we carry around and you need them.
So what? Just turn it on airplane mode. Just say I'm going dark for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I just discovered. Shout out to Guilt Chip. He said, "Why don't you just turn it on Do Not Disturb mode?" And I'm just a boomer, I was just like that. Those exist, so now it's always on Do Not Disturb, so it helps. But you look at the time, and because now it's your watch. And you open it up to see what time it is, and then you see an alert, and you're like, okay, I'll check the alert. And then you click the alert, and it's really hard to get away from it. I'm trying really, really, really hard, but managing 2 podcasts, music, and all this stuff, social life, it sucks you in at some point,
I have to admit, since trying to do the promo and stuff for the EP, like I've fallen out of a lot of good habits, right? Yeah. Because you do have to cruise Facebook and you've got to send your emails and all the rest of it. And because you're excited at the kind of responses you might be getting and stuff, you're checking your phone because you might miss something, right? And nobody wants to miss anything. But, I mean, I don't know, during a quiet period, I found the best thing to do was just turn your phone off, go visit some friends and just do without and then just work from there.
Could I recommend something for you in terms of online promo? I'm not sure if you're aware of this or whatever, but there's these, you could do them all from your browser. There's a tweet deck that's for Twitter. So you could post like as many tweets as you want and schedule them. So you could, you could pick like a Sunday, work for an hour, just post all this promo, and then you never have to look at it again. And then there's another one for Facebook and Instagram called Creator Studio. And you could just go in there and schedule all your stuff. I find it helps kind of get you away from logging in every day. If you could just schedule all the posts in advance and just have like a set day, you make yourself a coffee or tea or whatever and be like, for an hour, I'm going to put as much crap in this thing and then I'm never going to log into Facebook again.
That sounds very helpful because I hate cruising the social media. Like, I just, one of the reasons I'm not very good at it. And like, it's kind of part of the reason I like going to net labels as opposed to self-releasing and stuff, which is what a lot of guys on the podcast do. And again, that's cool as well. It's just, I fucking hate doing it.
Yeah. And
I'd rather outsource it to somebody else.
Yeah. Totally, 100%. That's the way I look at it. I there's a lot of labels like shout out to D-Trash. People will kind of be like, well, blah blah blah. Why would I put on a net label or whatever? And it's like because they fucking advertise for you.
Yeah, yeah. And they've got a bigger following. And if they're willing to take on what you're offering them, it's kind of like it's an inbuilt quality check because anybody can set up a Bandcamp, right?
Yeah.
But you've got to get somebody's buy-in to have your thing featured on their page. And I think, it's kind of an honor, right? It's quite nice to have like a demo accepted,
Yeah, for sure. And it's cool too, because like, some people complain about not getting the money from the net label, but that goes and it funds the other artists and it funds other things. And then what you're doing is you're creating a culture. Going back to the sort of a consumer corporate America music, that stuff exists because all the channels of communication are owned by whatever banker or Coca-Cola or wherever the fuck, when you start when you start your own label, you're creating your own culture. And if you look at, say, like breakcore, like that wasn't Geffen, that wasn't Universal Music that made fucking breakcore. That was a bunch of nerds on SoulSeek and the apextwin.nu forum and wearethemusicmakers.com. And that's where all that shit started, well, I mean, arguably you could say other sources, but I mean, in that time, it's about becoming the media, like Jello Biafra says, and with the net labels, you're becoming the media. When you start your own podcast, like I want everyone who's listening to this to start their own podcast, like there isn't any place to promote. Where are you going to promote, the transformation? Like you can't go on Joe Rogan. You can't go because it's all owned by these corporate places, right? And it's up to us to sort of create our own avenues of I guess public relations, so that we could get our message out there.
1,000%. I absolutely agree. And this is the beauty of the sort of cyberculture that breakcore and I guess other extreme genres of music kind of grew up in, right? Yeah. Because they are inaccessible at first, they need a kind of a community to grow around. They need to be grown, but people are willing to put a lot of work in to do it, right? I wasn't around at the SoulSeek time, but it sounded like there was sample exchanges and stuff. And if you ever remember Dogs on Acid,
yes.
It was, yeah. So I think it's still going, but people would be trading production tips and all the rest of it. But it was organic, right?
Yeah.
People wanted to help one another. And I kind of really like the idea of being a part of that, offering what I can, to people and then, having the sort of virtuous circle of creation and creativity. And I think that only really exists in non-commercial spaces because we know we need each other to survive.
Yeah. And well, that's just nature. You look at orcas in the Antarctic trying to swarm kelp in the sea, it's not going to be one orca. It's going to be 10 of them. Right.
Yeah.
It's just fucking nature, birds of a feather flock together, right? As they say. And that's sort of, you got people, whether they're in control of their emotions or not, you got to put your envy and jealousy aside because you're going to die if your friends don't succeed. That's just how it is, and you have to push each other up because you're against an industry that does not give a fuck about you. Look at what the RIAA is doing now. They're taking down YouTube DL. Have you heard of this? This is script on Linux. They banned it from GitHub. They DMCA'd it. And now they're banning people on Twitch because they had some sound effect in a video game that is getting a copyright claim. We have to fucking get rid of all that. I'm sorry, like not to get all angry or whatever, but we gotta support each other. We can't be in this world where Pepsi is the one controlling how I feel, and we need to keep these avenues of expression open to us, to the people.
Absolutely. I mean, the simple fact is, as the past few months have shown us, great technological progress can lead to greater freedom. but it can also lead to a monopoly on expression.
Yeah.
And for us to be heard, we do need to look after one another. I mean, it was fascinating with the RIAA to hear what they're doing because, you know, they've been pulling that shit since what, 1999, right?
I thought they were gone. I thought that shit did not exist. When I saw that, I got that email from Twitch like a while ago. I was like, fuck, these guys are still around?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's Jack Valenti who used to be the head of it or something. Very, very powerful bloke. I think he had Congress's ear at some point or something like this, but you know, it's part of the sort of the establishment. They've got a vested reason not to, they've got a vested reason to want to keep control. But, you know, even if we don't succeed and if we don't have the ears of many people, and let's say that we're vastly ignored by the mainstream, that's okay, because even then, at least there's a small patch of the internet somewhere. Maybe that's on archive.org or whatever. Yeah. And
they're in trouble now too. I don't know if you heard that.
Sorry?
They're in a lot of trouble now. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
tell me more.
They're trying to close them down because during COVID, at the beginning, they released some of the, you know, there's like a open library, like you could rent digital library books.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they fucked up and they were like, you don't need to, you can keep this for as long as you want or something like that. And now they're getting hit up real hard. And I think that was the fuck up that the industry was looking for, because I think a lot of people were pirating on archive.org as well. And I don't think people want archive.org to exist. If they could get rid of free culture and copy left things, I think they would be very happy about that.
I think so too, but this is the thing. Even if we fail, ideally there should be a corner of the internet or a corner of something somewhere to say, hey, look, we existed and this is our story. Okay, we make fucked up glitch beats. It sounds noisy to 99% of people, but here's who we are and here's where we are. This is part of, you know, this is part of the human story. As small and insignificant as it might be, like, it's still part of the tapestry of life.
I really hope this podcast plays into that tapestry a little bit, you know, because one of the reasons why I started was, you know, I'm friends with people that make music, and I think my friends are so freaking talented, you know, and it's just like, why the fuck are we still listening to shit on Spotify? You know, why aren't you listening to your friend who's a producer, or your cousin who's a producer, or that guy you work with who's a producer? Why don't you support them? Because now with the democratization of music production tools, it's not like their music sucks. They're pretty much on par, more or less, with any big production stuff, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, with sample packs and all the rest of it, like, you can sound amazing. And I think part of it though is that because everything's on an even par, where do you start, right? I mean, it's generally going to be the person who makes the most noise who gets the most exposure, right?
Yeah, and they aren't going to get exposure on these channels. That's why we have to create our own channels, give exposure to these people, and then and sort of grow ourselves. Because whoever is representing Cardi B, I think it's a fat chance that they're going to come and find us and put us out to the public. And if they do, they're going to want us to form to their message, you know?
Oh, absolutely. You know, bang, 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 bang. Pepsi's great.
Yeah, exactly. We should probably wrap this up. I feel like I'm taking a lot of your time. I totally appreciate. Matter. Yeah, I totally appreciate you coming on. Is there anything you want to talk about before you go, or where can we reach you? Where can we find out more about Felix Helix? Great convo. Oh. This is going to be one for the books.
I appreciate that. It's been great talking to you too. Okay, so I'll start this with, I'm crap with social media, but the best place to find me is chc08rm.net. That's my website. So I don't just do music. I do like pretty pictures and stuff too.
Cool.
So I'll stick that on the chat thread actually.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also have a YouTube channel, which is quite new. What we were talking about was, you know, music is getting sort of saturated in a sense. And I think one of the things that would be nice to do is to get some visuals going on with it to make a more complete aesthetic experience. So, let's get that across. Oh my God.
Twitter, Instagram, we'll find it, whatever. Don't worry about it now. We'll throw it in the show notes. Everybody check the show notes to find more of Felix Helix. Is there anything you...
Please do. I can't do the stuff on the fly. So,
is there anything you want to say before we go? What's your newest album? The Transformation.
Okay, so it's called The Transformation. I guess you can call it experimental breakcore with a sort of ambient twist.
Suck Punch Records.
Suck Punch Records, yeah.
Oh. No.
So thanks to them for hosting it. I'm not particularly active, but do listen through. I'm happy to hear from people in terms of collaboration or anything you just want to say. You know, when I'm talking about free culture and the exchange of ideas, I mean it. And so to that end, you know, reach out, please do, and we'll see what we can make happen.
Excellent.
I don't really have that much else to say, I don't think.
Excellent. Thank you once again for your time. Totally appreciate it. It's been an astounding interview.
Thank you. And hope to speak again soon. All right?
Yeah, for sure. Take care.
Take care. Take it easy.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
That was another episode of the Bassfug Podcast. Totally appreciate that you're listening to this. Hope you're checking out the other ones. You don't want to miss any of the juicy information and cool stories that our guests seem to bring to the table. I'm serious, though. We have some of the best guests. I don't know how I get them. But you're going to want to go check those out. Make sure you're subscribed because you'll miss all these great stories and music production tips. Check us out at www.bassfug.com. There's links to all of our social media, where the podcast is located, Apple Music, Spotify, you name it. Just go to www.bassfug.com. And thanks for everybody who's been liking and subscribing and commenting so far. It really means a lot. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by the superwill64.com Entertainment Network. For more great shows, podcasts, and music, please visit superwill64.com.